For thousands of years, humans have shared their lives with animals. From the loyal dog to the mighty horse, different species have shaped the path of our civilizations. But among them all, there is one humble creature that rarely receives the credit it deserves: the goat. Today, we know goats as playful, sometimes stubborn, and often funny animals. But behind their playful bleats lies a story of survival, intelligence, and deep partnership with humanity. To truly understand the untold history of goats, we must go back in time, nearly 10,000 years ago, to the dawn of agriculture. Archaeologists believe that goats were among the first animals ever domesticated by humans, even before cattle and horses. Evidence shows that this process began in the Fertile Crescent, a region stretching across modern-day Iran, Turkey, Syria, and parts of Pakistan. It was here, in the Rocky Mountains and valleys, that ancient humans first encountered wild goats, specifically the Bezoar ibex, the ancestor of all modern goats. Imagine those early hunter-gatherers, small human groups moving through rugged landscapes, constantly searching for food. Wild goats were everywhere, fast, agile, and difficult to hunt. But they also offered something incredible: meat, milk, skins, and bones, all in one animal. Unlike hunting large game, which was dangerous and unpredictable, capturing a few goats and keeping them alive near the settlement meant humans could access food and resources whenever they needed. And so, humans began experimenting with keeping goats alive rather than killing them on the spot. This small change would completely transform human history. Why goats and not some other animal? The answer lies in their adaptability. Goats can survive on rough, dry land where cows and sheep struggle. They eat shrubs, leaves, and even thorny plants that most animals would avoid. For early humans living in harsh environments, goats were a miracle of survival. They required little care, reproduced quickly, and gave milk that could be consumed fresh or turned into cheese, a revolutionary development at a time when refrigeration did not exist. Goat milk and cheese provided a reliable source of nutrition, even when crops failed. Additionally, goats were smaller and easier to manage than cattle. For nomadic tribes constantly on the move, carrying goats along the journey was much more practical than herding huge cows or oxen. In fact, goats became known as the poor man's cow because even families with few resources could raise them. Archaeologists have found goat bones in ancient settlements dating back to 8,000 to 9,000 BCE, showing clear signs of domestication. In these sites, bones from younger male goats were often found in large numbers. This suggests that early humans were selectively breeding goats, keeping females alive for milk and reproduction, while using young males for meat. This kind of planned animal management marks the birth of animal farming. Goats, therefore, were not just animals, they were the foundation of the first human villages. They provided food, clothing, and even tools: bones for needles, hides for tents, and horns for weapons. In many ways, goats allowed humans to settle down and form the first agricultural communities. You know, the story of goat domestication is not just about survival, it's really about partnership. Unlike some animals that resisted human control, goats actually adapted to life with humans surprisingly well. They're naturally curious and social, which made them a whole lot easier to manage. Over generations, wild goats slowly transformed into the domestic breeds we recognize today. But their wild instincts never fully disappeared. This is why goats are still agile, clever, and sometimes, honestly, a bit mischievous, even in modern farms. By around 7,000 BCE, goats had spread far beyond their original home in the Fertile Crescent. As humans migrated, they carried goats with them to new lands, from the mountains of Central Asia to the deserts of Arabia, and eventually into Europe and Africa. Everywhere they went, goats truly proved their worth. They thrived in deserts, mountains, and grasslands alike, showing once again why they became one of humanity's most trusted allies. To really understand the true journey of goats from wild creatures to domesticated partners, we need to go back into the mountains where it all began. Long before humans built cities or planted crops, goats roamed the steep cliffs and rugged valleys of Asia and the Middle East. These weren't the friendly farm goats we know today, but their ancestors, wild ibexes and the Bezoar goat, Capra aegagrus. These animals were absolute masters of survival, designed by nature to thrive in some of the harshest landscapes on Earth. By studying them, scientists have been able to trace the fascinating link between wild goats and the domestic breeds that live with us today. The ibex is a type of wild goat that's still found in mountain ranges across Europe, Asia, and Africa. They're famous for their enormous curved horns that can actually grow up to 4 feet long. These horns were not only weapons for defense and dominance, but also a symbol of strength in ancient mythology. Ibexes live in rocky, high-altitude areas where predators like wolves and leopards really struggle to reach. Their climbing ability is honestly legendary. Imagine a sheer mountain cliff that looks impossible to climb, yet the ibex moves across it like a skilled mountaineer. Their hooves are uniquely designed, soft in the middle for grip, and hard on the outside for stability. This combination allows them to leap across rocks with truly breathtaking balance. For early humans, ibexes were both a challenge and an opportunity. Hunting them meant food and materials, but catching such agile creatures was never easy. It's likely that admiration for their skill and survival also gave goats a special place in human culture and spirituality. While the ibex is impressive, it was actually the bezoar goat, Capra aegagrus, that played the most important role in domestication. Native to the mountains of Iran, Pakistan, and Turkey, the bezoar goat looks surprisingly similar to modern domestic goats. Males have these long, scimitar-shaped horns that sweep backward, while their coats can be brown, gray, or black, with lighter underbellies. The bezoar goat lived in semi-arid, rocky regions where survival depended on intelligence and adaptability. They could eat shrubs, tree bark, and tough plants that other animals just ignored. This survival skill was one of the main reasons humans saw potential in them. By capturing young bezoars and breeding them in captivity, humans began the slow process of turning wild goats into domesticated ones. Evidence from archaeology, is pretty compelling. Fossil and bone studies provide strong evidence that the bezoar goat is the direct ancestor of domestic goats. Archaeological sites in places like Ganj Dareh in Iran and Mehrgarh in Pakistan have revealed goat bones dating back more than 10,000 years. Scientists found clear signs that humans were controlling these populations, like, for example, selectively killing young males while keeping females alive for milk and breeding. DNA research has confirmed this link, showing that nearly all modern goat breeds can be genetically traced back to wild bezoar populations. In other words, every goat you see today, from the mountain goat of Switzerland to the dairy goats of Africa, owes its existence to those first bezoars tamed thousands of years ago. One reason humans valued goats so highly was, honestly, their ability to survive predators. Wolves, leopards, and large birds of prey often targeted goats, but their climbing skills and social behavior really helped them stay alive. Goats usually lived in herds, with males keeping watch, and females protecting the young. When threatened, they could quickly scatter across cliffs, leaving predators helpless. This survival instinct also made them challenging, but valuable for humans. A captured goat could escape easily, but if successfully tamed, it became a source of endless resources. This delicate balance between wildness and tameness is what shaped goats into unique partners for mankind. Even in their wild ancestors, goats displayed a level of intelligence and curiosity not often seen in other animals. Unlike sheep, which tend to follow the herd blindly, goats are natural explorers. They investigate their surroundings, learn from mistakes, and even problem solve. Scientists believe this trait was inherited from their wild ancestors, who had to navigate dangerous cliffs and constantly search for food in difficult environments. This same curiosity is what made goats easier to domesticate than, say, deer or antelope. While deer often panic and flee, goats adapt more quickly to new situations, including living near humans. So, the transformation begins. By gradually capturing and breeding bezoar goats, humans started to notice, these small changes. Over generations, goats became less aggressive, more social, and even physically different. Horns got smaller, their coats showed more color variety, and their body size changed depending on the environment. This whole process is called domestication syndrome, and honestly, It's something we see in many animals that humans have tamed. It's the reason why dogs look so different from wolves, or why domestic pigs really don't resemble wild boars. But goats, well, they manage to keep much of their wild ancestors' spirit, something you can still spot today when a goat escapes a farm fence or bravely climbs onto rooftops and trees. The bezoar and ibex still roam the wild today, serving as a living reminder of where our domestic goats came from. In many regions, they are protected species, admired for their beauty and agility. Watching them leap across cliffs is like, well, looking back in time, seeing the exact same skills and traits that first inspired humans to bring them closer. Without these wild ancestors, there would be no domestic goats, no goat milk, no cheese, and perhaps, human civilization itself would have been very different. The domestication of goats gave humans a reliable food source, helping them settle, farm, and eventually build cities. The wild goats, therefore, are not just animals of the past. They are the hidden foundation of our present. From the earliest days of domestication, goats became more than just animals. They were food providers, symbols of wealth, and even sacred creatures. As human civilizations began to rise, goats followed humans wherever they went, settling in villages, trading across empires, and appearing in religious rituals. To study goats in ancient civilizations is to see how deeply this humble creature shaped the course of human history. Mesopotamia, often called the cradle of civilization, is where farming and cities first appeared. Between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, people began growing crops and raising animals. Among these animals, goats were the most important. Clay tablets from ancient Sumer, around 3000 BCE, mention goats as a measure of wealth. Families with large herds of goats were considered prosperous. Goats provided milk, meat, hides, and wool-like hair. Goat milk was used not only for drinking but also to make some of the earliest cheeses in history. Goats also played a role in religion. Archaeologists have discovered statues and carvings of goats in temples dedicated to fertility gods. In fact, one of the most famous artifacts from Mesopotamia, known as the ram in a thicket, actually depicts a goat standing upright against a tree. This statue shows how goats were seen as symbols of life, fertility, and abundance. Traveling down to Egypt, goats once again held an important place in daily life. Egyptians raised goats for milk and meat, but they also saw them as spiritually significant. The god Khnum, one of the oldest Egyptian deities, was often depicted with the head of a ram or goat. He was believed to be the god of creation, shaping humans from clay on his potter's wheel. Egyptian tomb paintings often show goats being herded, milked, or sacrificed, proving how central they were to both economy and religion. Goats were sometimes offered to the gods as sacrifices, especially in rituals meant to ensure fertility of the land. Interestingly, goats in Egypt were also associated with the afterlife. Some pharaohs were buried with goat remains, suggesting they believed goats would provide food and companionship even beyond death. One of the oldest and most advanced civilizations, the Indus Valley, present-day Pakistan and northwest India, also relied heavily on goats. Archaeological digs in Mehrgarh and Mohenjo-Daro have uncovered goat bones dating back nearly 9,000 years. These findings show that goats were among the first domesticated animals